بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت عليم حكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم اللهم علمنا مما ينفعنا وينفعنا مما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير نويت تعلم والتعليم والتذكير ونفع انتفاع فالاستفادة وحتى تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء إلى هدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وسلام وطاعته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah, this week we're going to continue in our look at the different aspects of what we believe as Muslims, trying to gain this aspect of certainty. So we talked about last week the aspects of the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the reason why we say this is because there are going to be certain things that we are not going to be able to know or comprehend except that God gives us knowledge of. So we talked about this aspect before very briefly. So we talked about the aspect of a hukm aqli, which is a rational judgment, meaning something that I can just rationally come to understand. So for example, rationally I can come to understand 1 + 1 = 2, so on and so forth. And then you have the aspect of a hukm adli, which is an empirical judgment, which is, for example, that if I drop something from my hand, that is going to fall. That's something that, we've seen repeatedly over and over again, and we know that the ending result 9 times out of 10 is going to be that it's going to fall. Now, the other one that we mentioned was what we call the hukm shar'i, and we said that this is something that we can only come to after already affirming certain things from the other two categories. Meaning that before I can come to the aspect of a hukm shar'i, I have to actually believe in God. Then after that, I actually have to believe in the concept of God sending messengers. And then after that, I have to believe in the message that they sent. And then from there, then I can believe in whatever the message that's contained within it. And this is from the aspect of the books, as we mentioned before, in terms of we believe in all the books in their original form, and we say that the Quran is the last one that we have. And we talked about even the aspect of language and how that plays a role in it. So now we're going to be looking at certain aspects that are in the book itself. So the aspect that we're going to be looking at today is the aspect of the angels. Because from the standpoint of the angels is that this is not something that we can necessarily come to from a rational standpoint. Because rationally, is there any necessity for angels to exist per se? Nah. Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing to say rationally that we would come to understand that there are angels. Empirically, there's nothing that we have that will say that angels, necessarily exist. However, from an empirical standpoint, you could make the argument from an individual basis, meaning that some people will say that they've had experiences with angels and so on and so forth. But from the standpoint of, rationality, that's not necessarily going to be a fact. And then secondly, from an empirical standpoint, just because you say that you experience something doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to necessarily believe it. For example, someone came in here and said that I saw Bigfoot, how many people are actually going to say, oh really? Can you take me to go see him too? More than likely you're just going to be like, did you take your medication today? But this is from the aspect that we have in terms of there are certain things that we have that are from the aspect of, as it's mentioned in the Quran itself in the very beginning, the aspect of the ghaib. So in the beginning of the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it very clearly. ذَلِكَ كِتَابَ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm just going to kind of skip over a little bit to get to the main meat and potatoes, as one of my teachers like to say, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who believe in the unseen, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the unseen. Because part of the aspect of our belief in God is that we're going to believe in those things that are unseen. However, this should not necessarily be a situation where it's going to cause us any doubts if we look at it from the same standpoints as, for example, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who was the companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was considered to be the one that had the greatest iman of all the Sahaba. And one of the things that happened with Abu Bakr is that they tried to, put doubt in his heart about the Prophet ﷺ when he went on the Isra and Mi'raj. Just briefly, the Isra and Mi'raj was the time when the Prophet ﷺ was taken by Allah from Mecca to Jerusalem, and also he ascended the 7 heavens, and then he came back to Mecca all in one night, in an awakened state in his body, in a bodily state. And so they were trying to say, like, you hear what your companion is saying? He's saying that he did all this traveling in one night. Because at first the Prophet ﷺ only told him that he went from Mecca to Jerusalem and back in one night. He didn't tell him about the ascension to the heavens. And they said he did this, he said he's doing this in one night. And Abu Bakr has said, first and foremost, if he said it, then it's true. Meaning that I can't confirm that he actually said it because you're an enemy to me, so I'm not necessarily going to believe you at face value. However, I'm not going to deny it either because you still may be telling the truth. So if he said it, then it's true. But then he also said that I believe that he receives revelations from God. I believe he receives revelation from heaven. So why is it going to be any more difficult for me to believe that God can allow him to go from Mecca to Jerusalem and back in one night? So the aspect of, this aspect of believing in the unseen is that, we've already established, the aspect of who God is from a general perspective. So now it's coming to the standpoint of believing in those things that he can do. So again, we're going to be talking specifically about the angels. Now, one of the things to know about the angels is that the angels are beings of light that God has created. And one of the significant things about the angels is that the angels do not disobey God. Now, there's 2 concepts or 2 opinions in this regard. Some scholars say that the angels cannot disobey God, meaning that they don't have the capacity to do so, meaning that they have not been given free will in that way such that they could disobey God. It's an impossibility. Others have said that they just do not disobey God, meaning that hypothetically speaking they could, but they do not. But in either case, the angels are beings that do not disobey God. The majority of the scholars, they say that the angels do not disobey, meaning they cannot disobey. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such that they can only obey him. However, what this does in relation to the human being is that it puts the human being in a state or a position where a human being can actually be better than an angel. Now sometimes I get the question, well, how can a human being be better than an angel? Well, the concept is exactly what I just told you. Because the angels do not or cannot disobey God, the human being, we have that choice, meaning that we have an aspect of free will that God has given us. So I can choose to obey or I can choose to disobey. If I choose to obey and I'm consistent in that, then me choosing to obey God, that can put me in a position that makes me better than the angels, meaning that if I'm consistent in it and I'm sincere in it. So that's the best of God's creation, we say, are the prophets. Of the prophets, there are 5 in particular that are considered to be the greatest of them. Al-Muwatta, the 5 greatest prophets to ever walk the face of the earth. Those being Noah, Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So these are considered to be the 5 greatest prophets to ever walk the face of the earth. However, all the prophets, all in totality, are considered to be, the best of all creation. Then after that, you have the Sahaba themselves. The Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the best of all the prophets. So his community is the best of all community. This is the famous statement that's mentioned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that khayra qarni qarni, that the best of generation is my generation. And from amongst them, it's generally speaking considered to be, in terms of agreement, according to the majority of scholars, that the best of them is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Abu Bakr is the best of them. After Abu Bakr, then it's Umar, then Uthman, then Ali, essentially going in the order of the caliphate. And then after that, the generation after them, and then the generation after them. But all this is, just going to the aspect that the human being has the capability to rise to the best of its nature. And this is something that is alluded to in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا إِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So the translation, the meaning of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He's created the human being in the best of molds. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا إِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That we've created the human being in the best of molds. So every human being in its natural state, its fitrah, is created in the best of molds. However, if you look at the next verse, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Then we have lowered them to the lowest of the low. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Except for those who believe and do righteous good deeds. So the basic concept of it is that the human being has the potential to be of the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. We have that capability. However, at the same time, we have the capability to be the worst of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. Why is that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored us, and particularly He's favored us with the intellect and this aspect of free will. So what that means is that if a person were to rise, first and foremost to believe in God, and then after that, to do righteous good deeds, to work, righteousness in the world, that will raise him to that aspect of the ahsan ta'wim, the most excellent of molds. However, if we do the opposite of that, which essentially is just giving into our desires, then we can go to be lower than the animals. Why is that? Because the animals, what do the animals do? The animals, they just go off their base desires. So an animal, it'll eat, it'll sleep, it'll procreate, and then it'll do it all over again. However, at the same time, the animals don't do things that are naturally going to harm them. Like for example, if you put an animal in a situation where there's some harm that comes to that animal, what is going to be that animal's natural response the second time around or third time around? I mean, given the aspect of the intellect, but generally speaking, the animal is going to, defend itself. It's going to stay away from it. It's not going to go towards that thing a second, third time around. However, you look at the human being, we can be told, we can see it, we can have everything in the world show us something is harmful to us, we still do it. How many people are still smoking cigarettes today? How many people know someone that died of lung cancer? How many people are still drinking alcohol today? How many people die? I think they say that people die more from alcohol-related deaths than other drug-related intoxicated situations. So on and so forth. Is that we're the only creation where we'll know for certain that something can cause us harm, and we'll still do it over and over again. But this is that concept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is why elsewhere in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that كَالْأَنَامْ بَالْأَدَلْ, that they're like cattle, meaning like they're like animals, but actually they're more astray than animals. Why? Because the animal, he's just going to do those natural things that are just beneficial for their livelihood. We'll go above and beyond that and do things that are just completely useless, completely harmful, so on and so forth. I mean, just look at the things that we take entertainment in. Look at the sports world, for example. You have things like, boxing and UFC and all these type of things. You have people literally almost killing themselves, and you have a whole auditorium of people cheering them on for nothing but entertainment. So this is that concept. So we have the capability, but the angels themselves, they don't fall into these two categories. The angels themselves, they only obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the angels are beings of light that only obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but with that aspect of them being beings of light, they also can take the form of other things. It is possible for angels to take the form of other things. One of the primary examples that we have of this is in the famous narration from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when the angel Jibreel came to visit him. In particular, he visited him while the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his other companions. And so the famous hadith is when the Prophet ﷺ, and we talked about this hadith before, so I'm not going to go into detail about it, but when he asked him about Islam, Iman, Ihsan, the angel Jibril, he came in the form of a man. However, the angel Jibril also will come in the form of a man, at other periods of time, and he actually would often resemble one of the Sahaba by the name of Dihya al-Kalbi. Dihya al-Kalbi was one of the Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He's one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and the angel Jibril would often take the form of Dihya. Part of it was that Dihya was a very, handsome individual. And so the angel Jibril will sometimes come in the form of, resembling Dihya al-Kalbi. And so the angels themselves, can take the form of other beings. This is part of the aspect of, some of the ulama, cautioning us how we deal with creation. Is that, you never know what it is that you're necessarily dealing with. Meaning that it's possible that you could be interacting with an angel in some type of way. And this also goes into the concept, it's not exactly related, but it also goes into the concept that, for example, that you have different thoughts that can come to you. Some are considered to be angelic, some are considered to be demonic, and also some of them considered to be godly. And the way that some of the scholars, they did differentiate between them is that they say that anytime that you get a thought, and particularly if it's just like a random thought that just kind of pops in your head out of nowhere, and it's something, impermissible or something disgusting or something like that, that is more or less indication that it's a demonic thought. Meaning that it's not necessarily from you yourself, but it's the shaitan or one of the shayateen, one of the devils, trying to kind of get you to see. It's kind of like throwing a net in the ocean, see if it gets any bites. See if he can get you to kind of keep pondering about it. And so that's why the best thing to do in those type of situations is just to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, and just ignore it. However, if it's a thought that kind of lingers, meaning that, if it's a thought that, you know that it's wrong, that it's haram, whatever the case may be, but it just keeps lingering. You can't get rid of it. That's actually indication that it's not from the shaitan, but that's indication that's from you. Meaning that's an indication that it's something that you actually desired. And so that's like giving you a understanding that, this is something that you're going to have to work on. This is what some of the scholars mention, for example, sometimes people ask the question, well, if the shayateen, if the devils are chained up in Ramadan, and we're fastly approaching Ramadan, if the devils are chained up in Ramadan, then why do I still commit sin? Or why do I, still have these thoughts and so on and so forth? Some of the scholars will say that's an indication that is actually from you, it's not the shaitan. That, those are your thoughts. You can't blame, you can't say that, the shaitan put those thoughts in my head. No, those are yours. And so, those are, situations for us to reflect upon. The next category that we mentioned are the angelic thoughts. Generally speaking, these are thoughts that some of the scholars, they say, are thoughts that come to you to do some type of good. And you may fight with yourself, and when I mean fight with yourself, you may, debate about yourself, whether I should do it or not. So you get the thoughts, there's a charity or something like that, and you get the thought, maybe I should donate money. That may be an angelic thought that comes to you. An angel may be trying to coerce you to do that. And then you might just sit and kind of debate it with yourself, do I have enough? Is this going to be enough, or should I just wait? The times is kind of hard right now. The thing is that one of my teachers, he says that whenever you get a type of thought like that, meaning that you get a thought to do something good, especially if it comes to the aspect of finances, where you can donate or something like that, one of the best things that you can do is just give and not think about it, no matter how much it is. Because what he said is that, what will happen sometimes is that, remember we said that, you have, angelic thoughts, you have shaitanic thoughts, and so on and so forth, is that the shaitan, he doesn't want you to receive any type of good. So anytime that you have some type of good that you may think about doing or something like that, the shaitan often is going to try to convince you not to do it and give you whatever reason to do so. So for example, if you're thinking of giving some type of money, the shaitan may say something like, you cheapskate, you're only going to get $5? What's $5? That's not going to do anything. like, you can't, that you can't just give that. You can have more. And so what that happens is that you start wrestling with yourself, like, yeah, $5 really isn't enough. Like, that would be, that's like insulting and so on and so forth. But then what happens? You don't give anything. And now it's his original plan from the get-go. Whereas if you'd have just gave him the $5, no matter how little or big it may have seemed, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he informed us, never belittle any good that you do. But the shaitan, he's going to try to get you to not do anything at all. That's his whole goal. It's not about necessarily getting you to do something, but even if he could just get you to do nothing, that's, beneficial for him. Because why? Because then on Yawm al-Qiyamah, your deeds are going to be light. Wow. And when it comes from the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not about the quantity, but it's about the sincerity of hearts. Exactly. Because for example, someone can give $1 million, but if they're doing it to show off and to brag and so on and so forth, they very well could be one of the first people to be thrown into the hellfire. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ.
And I can't even think about how many times what you said, you're thinking like, this is not enough, or how am I going to do this later on if I give this money up? But then you go ahead and do it, and then you just get lots of blessings.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like you don't even miss it.
Yep.
Because something good has happened.
Yep.
And I think sometimes, I'm speaking for myself, you forget that, you know what I mean?
Yes, you do.
But that is food for thought to just give, like you said. Even if you say, I would rather give $100, but I only got 50, but maybe I'll just wait. That is really true.
Yeah. Or even sometimes say, like, you somebody on the street and they ask you, you just gonna take this and just go get whatever, right. Either you're gonna give it or you're not gonna give it. You don't even know what they're gonna do with it. You understand what I'm saying? But you say that, just give it. Yeah. Wow.
And I used to be like that. I'm not gonna front. I used to be like, no, you're not. In my mind, I'm thinking I'm not gonna do it because I know you're gonna go do whatever. Now, if I have it, I try to keep once. I just do it because I feel like, just like that person, or I tell the people, what you do and don't do, what you do and what you don't do is between you and God.
That's right.
I have nothing to do with that. I feel like I did my part. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
so many times that was like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, the aspect of sadaqah is that sadaqah, there's really no condition on sadaqah. The only condition is that, for example, like, it's one thing to speculate if someone's going to do something. It's another thing if you know for certain. So, like, if I know for certain, like, for example, someone has I need a beer sign or something like that. Yeah, I can't give you money.
He's so good at giving examples.
But if someone is just saying, like, I'm hungry or whatever the case may be, then, but this is, but one of the things that Shaitan will try to do is that he will try to get you out of that. And this is one of the things, to try to help us, because, there's nothing that we spend for the sake of Allah, except, as you mentioned, we get it back multifold. This is why the Sahaba, their certainty in Allah was such that when they used to be in financial difficulties, what they used to do, they used to increase in sadaqah. They used to increase in giving out in charity. Why? Because they saw it as an investment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you give for my sake, I'll give you even more than what you give. And that's how the Sahaba looked at it. And so when they had financial hardships and difficulties, they actually used to give more in sadaqah. And they were looking for the return from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you mentioned, when a person has sincerity in it, you'll see that return. I've had it happen to me. I mean, I had a situation where I was shifting jobs, and it was like a 3-month period between, me leaving my former job and starting the other job. And, whatever happened, times started to get a little rough, whatever the case may be. I randomly got a check in the mail for like over $1,000. I was like, where did this come from?
Right.
And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one that provides. And so the shaitan, what he wants you to do is that he wants you to fear poverty. But that's not the case. So from the angelic standpoint, the angels, they'll often try to encourage you to do good. Then you have those thoughts that are Rabbani, that are more or less, godly thoughts. And these are more or less thoughts of kind of changing your whole, outlook of things, where it's like, you start to take a path, truly going towards God. And so,
What's that called again?
Rabbani in Arabic, or godly thoughts,
Okay.
or lordly thoughts. It's hard to translate Rabbani into English, but godly type of thoughts. So the angels, essentially, are beings who actually are looking out for the human being. In particular, if a human being is of those, again, who believe and do righteous good deeds. And how do we know this? We know this from a statement from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a statement from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he mentions that إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ أَبْدًا دَعَا جِبْرِيلٌ, is that if Allah loves a servant, then he calls the angel Jibril. And then he tells Jibril, Ya Jibril, inni uhibbu fulan fa'hibbuh. Verily, I love so-and-so, so you love him too. And then when Jibril is given that command, Jibril goes to the people of the heavens, and he calls out to the people of the heavens, Da'a ahl as-sama, ya ahl as-sama, inna Allah qad ahabba fulan fa'hibbuh. O heavens, O people of the heavens. Who are the people of the heavens? The other angels. And he says to the other angels, O people of the heavens, verily Allah loves so-and-so, so you love him as well. And then the Ahl as-Sama, the people of the heavens, love that individual. And then a qabul, an acceptance, is placed for that individual in the earth. This is similar to the Prophet ﷺ mentioning that, even some of the animals or some of the inanimate objects, they make dua for the one that believes in Allah. And so essentially what happens is that, we can put ourselves in a situation where the angels are looking out for us. And this is something that, we should take in consideration. This is why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned certain things to us that actually help to attract the angels to us. So for example, a person remaining in a state of wudu, that is something that attracts the angels. The angels are attracted to those who are in a state of purification. This is why it's not recommended to stay in a state of janaba, meaning a state of major ritual impurity, for a long period of time. For sisters it's a little bit different, but that is a different type of situation, because there is a particular amount of time, generally speaking, every month, that a sister would be, quote unquote, in a state of major ritual impurity. But we're talking about in those situations where you can be in a state of ritual purity. It's recommended, if you can, to keep that purity. The angels are attracted to that. Also, the angels are attracted to those who have a good bodily hygiene about themselves, meaning that they don't smell offensive. The angels are displeased or dispelled by offensive smells. And so just having a basic cleanliness about you. This is similar to the Prophet ﷺ. He encouraged us even to the concept of, way before the toothbrush was ever invented, the Prophet ﷺ highly encouraged his companions to keep their mouths clean. It's actually disliked for a person to go to the mosque and their breath is not fresh, meaning that they've either eaten something that is displeasing, or in particular onions and garlic, or for example, they just their breath has changed either from sleep or something like that, and they haven't done anything to freshen their breath. And part of it is that, again, the angels are displeased in that. This is one of the reasons that some of the scholars mention that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the angels do not enter to a house where there's a dog. In particular, because dogs often are not the best smelling animals around, and also dogs can be somewhat dirty amongst themselves compared to others. Like, for example, cats are much cleaner than dogs are, generally speaking, and so on and so forth. And so these are things that can actually help a person to attract the angels. Also, having our homes be neat and tidy and having good smells, the angels are attracted to that. Also, the angels are extremely attracted to those who are engaged in dhikr, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are all things that can attract the angels. Now the thing is that even if a person is not necessarily gung-ho about attracting the angels, they're just kind of like, I just want to go about my day however it goes. The thing is that if we're not being conscious of this, then the opposite becomes true. The opposite is that the opposite of those things that I mentioned actually attract the shayateen. They attract the jinn.
Yeah, because I'm in my mind thinking, why would you not want that? You know?
Yeah. But the thing is that, you know, you have people who we don't even necessarily think about that. But the opposite of those things, they attract the jinn. You know, for example, even something as simple as, you know, making sure that you don't leave dishes overnight. You know, that is something that attracts the jinn. And you don't want the jinn to be attracted to your house, you know, and things of that nature. And so, you know, these are things that, you know, are things that you want to kind of be conscious of, such that you're able to be of those who have the angels become, you know, more attracted to you, so that they can be, you know, of those who assist you in your company.
And protection.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the angels, you know, they're at the service of the believers. How do we know this? We know this partly from the Quran itself. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, you know, this aspect of, you know, when the Prophet ﷺ had his battles, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sent some of the malaika to assist the believers. And so if that was for the case of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Sahaba, it's an indication that it's possible for even those that come after them, if they're following in their path, is that the angels can, you know, assist a person, you know, in these different matters. And so these are things that we want to try to do, you know, to try to, you know, be in a situation where we can attract the angels to us, you know. And even certain things that, you know, just, you know, because we don't necessarily always know these type of things, but even certain things that we do, you know, in our everyday, you know, getting up. So like, for example, when we go to the bathroom, is that, you know, we should not speak in the bathroom, you know, because this way, you know, the angels, they have a sense of modesty themselves. And so when a person goes into the bathroom, the angels will actually wait outside the bathroom while you're using it. But if you start to speak, then it, you know, more or less forces them to, you know, come into that environment. So, you know, even, you know, making sure that we hold on to that aspect of the sunnah is that, you know, we don't speak while we're using the restroom. And then even also, you know, if we're married, is that if we're going to have intimate relations with our spouse, is that, you know, is actually preferable to cover ourselves so that, you know, our nakedness is not exposed. And so, you know, these are things that, you know, we should be conscious of, you know, out of, you know, just respect for the angels as well. So this is, you know, part of the aspect of, you know, the angels. Now, in terms of different functions that the angels possess, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he's informed us of different roles that the angels have. So there are some angels who the Prophet ﷺ informed us, for example, on his Ihra Mi'raj, when he ascended to the 7 heavens, is that there are some angels who their job is that they go around one of the Kaabas in the heavens, and they enter into that Kaaba, 70,000 of them, and they never come out. And they do this every day. So God knows how many angels, you know, there are. They say that for every single raindrop or snowflake or any of those things that come down to the earth, there's an angel responsible for bringing it down. So how many raindrops and snowflakes have come down since the beginning of the earth? You also have some angels whose job it is to be in a state of ruku', that their entire existence is that they're in the ruku' position. Others, their entire existence is in the sujood position, the prostration position, so on and so forth. However, there are 10 angels that we are necessarily required to know. There are 10 angels that we necessarily are required to know, and we're going to mention who they are. So the first of the 10 angels is the one that most people are familiar with, and that is the angel Jibril, or in English we usually say Gabriel. The angel Jibril, his job function is that, his primary job function, should I say, is that he is the one that sends down the revelation. That is his primary job function. Now, the reason why I said that's his primary job function is because I'm alluding to the fact that he has other job functions, but that's his primary one. And so, one of the aspects of the angel Jibril is that we say that every prophet has to have an encounter with Jibril in order to be considered to be a prophet. This is why some scholars, not the majority, but some scholars will debate of whether or not you can consider Mary to be a prophetess or not. In particular, because one of the things is that she did have an encounter with Jibril. So Jibril is the and Jibril is also the archangel, meaning that he is the lead angel, so to speak. He is the master of the angels. And this is kind of, hinted to in a hadith that we mentioned, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He loves a servant, that da'a Jibril, that He calls Jibril. And then Jibril is responsible to go and inform the other angels of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed him of. So Jibril is considered to be the archangel, and his primary function is that of revelation. Then you have the angel, in Arabic we call him Mikael, in English we call him Michael. So you have Mikael. Mikael, his primary function is that he controls wind and rain and those types of sustenance. Meaning that, we say?
The weather?
Yeah, more or less like the weather patterns that we see, wind and rain and these type of things. That is more or less, his primary function. Now, when we say that, we mean that in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, puts him in that position, but ultimately it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that controls everything, as we mentioned before. Yeah. It's just like, I'm
sorry, so we should say his primary function, not that he controls.
Yes, exactly. So it's just like, for example, if I were to say that, I'm controlling this camera and this microphone right now. Ultimately, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's controlling it, meaning giving me the ability to do anything with it.
Right.
But, I'm the means by which it's being done. Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of me or anything else for this to be done. So this is one of the things that we always have to recognize, is that Allah will assign the angels for these things even though He's not in need of them. So this is Mikael. Again, Mikael, he has the function of the wind and the rain and these type of things, and that's his primary function. However, if you want to say that, if Jibril is the archangel, the head angel, Mikael is kind of like his understudy, so to speak, or second in command. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He aided the Prophet ﷺ with the angels on the Battle of Badr, there was one flank that was headed up by Jibril, and another flank was headed up by Mikael. And so, these are two primary angels that we have.
Could you spell that?
Mikael.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the Arabic spelling because I had to spell it before. But if you want to just keep it in English, it's Michael. But Mikael, I'm trying to think. Mikael. I'm thinking it'd be Mim, Kaf, Mikael, Ain, Ya, Lam. Yeah, so if I were to try to spell it into English, it'd be M-A-K-A.
Or you could Google
the little Ein sign, E-E-L, but it's kind of hard to spell. So if I were to try to M-I-K-A-E-E-L, I'm just giving you like a bad transliteration of it, because I know how to use the transliteration from academic standpoint, but even using that, some of the characters are not actually English letters. Like Ain in Arabic, and if you were to try to transliterate it in English, it basically looks like a small C in the air. So it's like, I can't, I couldn't even give you like the official translation.
Mikael or Mikael? That's why I was like.
No, it's Mikael.
Mikael.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the English translation is Michael. So you have Mikael. The next one is Israfil. Israfil, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Raphael in English. The angel Raphael, I believe, is the name in English. But in Arabic, we call him Israfil. Israfil, his primary function, his primary job is that he's going to be the one to blow the horn on the last day. And so it's been mentioned that he's already has the trumpets right next to his mouth, ready to blow. And part of the reason why that is because the Prophet ﷺ, he informed us is that his coming and the last day are like this. And he put his two fingers up like this. The basic aspect of it is that the Prophet ﷺ, he is the final prophet. There is going to be no prophets coming with anything new after him. So that is a sign of the ushering in of the last day. However, the reason why, because people will say, well, it's been 1400 years since his death and so on and so forth. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, a day to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be like 1,000 years in your reckoning. So when we're talking about the aspect of closeness, we're talking about in the aspect of in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, technically speaking, if you were to take 1,000 years, and compare that to a day, then only a day has passed, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So yes, it is close. Because also you have to think about it as well, is that again, from the standpoint of Scripture, we've been informed, and also from the standpoint of the Prophet ﷺ, again, this comes to the aspect of believing in the unseen, is that we as a people, meaning people in general, we're actually regressing, not progressing. Like, the aspect, people always say like, we're progressing as human beings and so on and so forth. Well, technically, we actually say that we're regressing. Adam, alayhi salam, they said that he was about 60 cubits tall, which would be somewhere around like 50 feet or something like that. And I probably got the numbering off. So we're already getting shorter. Nuh, alayhi salam, for example, he called his people for 950 years. Like, meaning that's how long he was calling people to the oneness of God. That's not his lifespan. The famous story that's mentioned about the time of Nuh alayhi salam, the time of Noah, is that there was a woman whose son had passed away, and she was crying at his grave, and Nuh alayhi salam had walked past, and he was trying to comfort the woman, and she said like, what's wrong? And she was saying, oh, my son, he passed away, and he was so young, he was just in the prime of his life. And Nuh alayhi salam was asking, how old was he? And she just kept saying, he was just so young, he was just a baby, he only just began his life, and so on and so forth. And so Nuh said, how old was he? And she says, he was only 200 and some odd years old. And Nuh smiled. And she, kind of became a little bit, disturbed, because, why are you smiling? I'm just telling you about the loss of my son. And Nuh alayhi salam has said to her, do you know that there's going to come a time when the average lifespan of a people is only going to be 60 years? She said, 60 years? She said that if my life was only going to be 60 years, I'll spend my entire time in sujood. I'll spend my entire time in prostration. But, the aspect of relativity, if you're living to be 1,000 years old and so on and so forth, then relatively speaking, 60 years is nothing. And, and this is why the scholars, they mention to us, be very careful about your time. Because put it like this, how many hours are there in a day?
24.
24, okay. How many hours do you sleep?
Me? About 4.
Yeah.
4?
So 5, maybe.
Okay. So the average person, I believe they say, will between 6 to 8 hours. Let's go with the latter. Let's say 6 hours, right? 6 hours, you sleep. Now, you take 6 hours, 24 divided by 6 is what? 4. 4. So that means that 1/4 of your life is just gone just in sleep. So if you spend 6 hours sleeping, that means 1/4 of your day is sleeping. Let's say you live for 80 years, just to make it an even number. That means what? 20 years is spent just sleeping. Now, most people are not necessarily going to live 80 years, but let's just hypothetically say that you live for 80 years. That means 20 years of your life is just sleeping.
Technically, time goes by really fast, so you don't even have to be that detailed. I mean, this weekend alone, there's nothing that I checked off on my to-do list for the house. Wow, that's done.
But, this is, why the scholars, they mention, be very, conscious about your time, because time is your most precious gift. This is why one of the scholars, they said that he was walking, and while he was walking, a man had come to him and said, Can I have a second? Can I, talk to you for a minute? And the scholar had said back to him, hold the sun. Meaning that if you can hold the sun, then, you can take some time. Other than that, I have things that I have to do. The whole concept is that, the way that, some of my teachers would put it to give the example is that they say the human being is like on an open field. And everyone is lined up one by one. There's just one long line and everyone is lined up right next to each other and they're marching forward. And in front of them is a hole that they can't see. Some people, their hole is close. Some people, their hole is a little bit further. Some people, their hole is even further. But eventually everyone's going to fall into it. And that's the concept that they use to show this aspect of life, is that, that hole is representing of what? Your grave. Because once you fall into your grave, there is no coming back. And so this aspect of being conscious about the time that we're utilizing, because we only get to do it once. And we don't want to be of those who are disappointed when we come to, meet our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because this is, the life that He's given us, and He's given us one chance to get it right, so to speak. So there is a concept, there is a truthfulness to that whole concept of YOLO, you only live once. However, the aspect of it is that you only live in this world once. And then what comes after that, that will last forever. And so you want to be very conscious of that. And so this is why time is considered to be something that, as one of my teachers put, time is not something you should kill, time is something that you should give life to. That, whenever you have quote unquote free time, you should think to yourself, okay, what can I do that's going to benefit me and my relationship to my Lord? Because that is what lasts forever. Like, a lot of times when we have free time, we're trying to think of what can entertain me for the next 5 minutes or the next 20 minutes or the next, half hour or something like that. Our concept should actually change. What can I do that's going to benefit me forever?
Yeah, I heard a coupon that was some type of time and wasting time.
Yeah.
And lots of times we'll say, I'm just wasting time. And you think about what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wasting time.
And time is just think about, another way, and I'll end with this one in terms of this concept because we're going to go past time. But another thing that, my teachers have mentioned to us is that, you can look at yourself as being a number of breaths. That every time you breathe in and breathe out, that's one last breath that you have. Meaning that, every breath that you take, you're that much closer to your death. And this is one of those, kind of like, the opposite meanings that we have is that, the ironic thing about life is that as soon as you're born, you start to die. And that's the basic concept of this, is that all of us, all we're doing is that, everyone is dying technically. It's just that, some are more, more alert about their upcoming death than some of the rest of us. But ultimately, all of us are dying. So it's
we do are accelerating it.
yeah, yes, exactly. Some of the things that we do just accelerate it. And so Israfil, he's waiting to blow the horn when it will be the end of all. The next one is, he has two names. One name is Azra'il. The other name is Malak al-Maut, which is the angel of death. So the angel of death, as his name entails, is the angel who at the end of our life will take our souls. Now the angel of death, and this is the concept with all angels, is that the angels, they do not have a sense of, and you'll understand it when I talk about Malik a little bit more, but the angels, they do not have a sense of feeling sorry, for example, per se, when it comes to commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that if they've been commanded to do something, then that's just it. There is no I feel sorry for you, or no, this is my command, that's it. So the reason why I mentioned this with Malak al-Maut, angel of death, is because when he comes to take your soul, he's either going to do it gently or he's not. And for him, it doesn't really make a difference. But how you determine whether or not you're going to be taken gently or not is essentially, where's your relationship with your Lord ultimately. As the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, the one who is eager to meet their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eager to meet them. And the one that's displeased to meet their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased to meet them. And it's not to say that, because, even the Sahaba asked the question, it's like, but no one, wants to die, like, no one looks forward to death. It's not an aspect of looking forward to death per se, but it's the aspect of having a good opinion of your Lord, and in particular, not having an attachment to this world, this dunya, which is very hard to do. And the reason why that is because many of us, we like what we can sense with our five senses. So like, we like clothes, we like cars, we like houses and these type of things. And so what happens is that we start to get attached to those things. Family, so on and so forth. So when we start to get attached to those things, it makes it a situation where we don't want to leave, we don't want to go. And sometimes it'll bring us to a situation where we'll do things that we know we shouldn't in order to obtain those things. And so if these things become, prevalent in a person's life, then that is a means of them, having, a difficult time, leaving this world. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he always tried to emphasize for us this aspect of having a sense of zuhud. And we talked about this aspect of zuhud before, is that zuhud is not about whether or not I have things in my hand, it's all about whether or not it's permeating into my heart. And so the concept in Islam is that I want to come to a point where I love things purely for the sake of the one who bestowed them on me. Like for example, I love my son, even though I don't want him sitting here right now. I was trying to keep him off camera, but I love my son. But my love for my son should be such that I love my son based upon the one who gave my son to me. Meaning that technically speaking, he's not my son per se. He's a right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to me that I have responsibility over, but ultimately he belongs to Allah. This is why, for example, you mentioned about my son needing a sibling. He does have a sibling, he has a younger brother. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returned his younger brother back to him shortly after his brother was born. Now, the thing is that, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a woman who had a similar situation where the husband was away and her son had passed away. Their son had passed away. And one of the things that she said to her husband when he got back, because she didn't inform him right away that his son had passed away. One thing she had said to him, she said, "What would you say if someone let you borrow something, and then after a period of time they came back to reclaim that thing? They came back, to reclaim the thing that they let you borrow." And he said that, they would be well within their rights. That's their property. They can come and get that. And so she said to him, "Well, Allah gave you your son, and he came back to claim him." And so this is kind of like the concept that we want to try to have in terms of this dunya, where it's that anything that I have, it's only that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to me for a certain period of time. And this is that concept that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, remember often the end of all pleasures, because death is going to separate us from everything. But from the standpoint of a believer, in particular, if we are able to be blessed that we have, family and friends who are also believers, is that we understand that this is just a temporary setback, so to speak, or a temporary separation. Because ultimately, we're all going to die. That's the reality. Ultimately, we're all going to die. But we don't want it to be a situation where we're so concerned about staying here that when the angel of death comes, that he'll rip our souls out of our bodies. Now, in particular, this will be for the people who are of disobedience and disbelief. However, even for a person who may be a believer, it may be that, he still or she still has a connection to this dunya, which, holds them back a little bit. And so it'll be a little bit more difficult to remove their soul. But essentially, you want to come to a point where you have somewhat of a longing, in terms of, when I say a longing, I'll put it to you in the way of Bilal bin Rabah. Bilal bin Rabah, the first muezzin, the muezzin of the Prophet ﷺ, the call of the adhan of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was on his deathbed, his wife had said, "Oh, what a miserable day this is." And Bilal had said in response to her, "Oh, what a wonderful day this is. I finally get to be with my beloved and his companions." Meaning he was talking about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Umar and those that had passed away before him. Now, it's not to say that we're necessarily going to come to that point, but to try to come to a point where we do, as one poet would say, how else do men ascend to the well, I forget the exact verse or poem, but essentially, everyone wants to go to paradise, but no one wants to die. That's the basic concept. You ask anyone, how many people want to go to heaven? Everyone raises their hand. Then you ask the next question, how many people want to die? The fitra. But, the angel of death, Azrael, he's the one that's going to take your soul. So that is 4. The next I'm going to do in 2s. The next are Raqib and Atid. Raqib and Atid, they are the angels that sit on your right and your left shoulder.
Is there an English?
I don't know if there's an English equivalent.
Okay,
so Raqib, Raqeeb, and Atid, Ateed. Raqib and Atid. Ateed.
Okay.
It's just that, again, because some of the letters in there are those special ones, those special characters, I'm just giving you the closest with just basic English letters. So, but Raqib and Atid. Raqib sits on your right shoulder, Atid sits on your left shoulder. And it's not like the, television show concept where you got the good angel and the devil sitting on your right and left shoulder. No, these are both angels, so they're both good. It's just that one is responsible for writing down your good deeds, the other one is responsible for writing down your bad deeds. Raqib writes down your good deeds, Atid writes down your bad deeds. However, Raqib is in charge of the two. So essentially what happens is that if a person commits a bad deed, Atid, before he writes it down, he's told not to, he's told to wait. And he's told to wait to see if a person will actually make tawbah from that. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that قُلِ بَنَيْ آدَمْ خَطَّى. Or there's another narration I believe that says كُلُّكُمْ خَطَّى. All of you will make mistakes. All of you will commit acts of disobedience. But then he said something after that. He said what? وَخَيْرَ قَطَّاعِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. But the best of those who make mistakes, the best of those who commit wrong actions are the ones who constantly turn back in repentance. So this is, the benefit that we have. And the Prophet ﷺ explained that a little further by mentioning that anytime that you intend to do a bad deed and you don't do it, you have one good deed written for you. Anytime that you intend to do a bad deed and actually do it, you have one bad deed written for you. Anytime that you intend to do a good deed but you don't do it, you have one good deed written for you. And anytime that you intend to do a good deed and you actually do it, you have that good deed and it's multiplied however many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to multiply it. So essentially the odds are in your favor, as they would say. But even from the standpoint of the acts of disobedience, is that even when you do that, you can still wipe them out by doing what? By making tawbah. By turning back to Allah and repentance. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, encouraged us to be of those who constantly turn repentance. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ. That verily Allah loves those who constantly return to Him in repentance. So essentially there shouldn't be a day that goes by except that we're seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Essentially. Because this was the normal practice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But Raqib and Atid are the two angels that are responsible for that. Then you have Munkar and Nakir. So this is number 7 and number 8. Munkar and Nakir, these are the two angels who are going to ask you those famous questions. The 3 questions that every person is going to be asked in their grave. Who is your Lord? Who is your Prophet? And what is your deen? What is your religion? Now the thing, Raqib, Raqeeb. Excuse me, I'm responding to Raqib and Atid. It's Munkar and Nakir are the two angels in the grave. So Munkar Munkar, and Nakir, Nakir. Munkar and Nakir.
Okay.
Now, these two angels are going to ask you these three questions. Now, everyone, hypothetically can, blurt out what the answer is. It's like, okay, Allah, Muhammad, Islam. Okay, I'm good. That's not the way that the test is going. Mm-hmm. Meaning that, yes, they're going to ask you these three questions. Yes, the answer is Allah, Muhammad, and Islam. However, your capability, or the opposite, your incapability of answering those questions, are going to be based upon how you actually lived in this world. Did you live that Allah was your Lord? Did you live that the Prophet Muhammad was your prophet? And did you live that Islam was your deen? If that's your reality, yes, you'll be able to answer those questions. If that is not your reality, it doesn't matter how often you've memorized it. It doesn't matter if everyone at your janazah reminds you of it. If you did not live that way, that is not going to be the answer that you're going to give. And then after that, if that's the case that you can't answer those questions, then everything is just going to be worse for you going forward. However, if you can answer those questions, then inshallah ta'ala, you will have bliss in your grave. And the aspect of the grave is that it's an indication of what's to follow in the akhirah. And so, just imagine how many people have spent more time in their grave than they have in this world. The people who died back in 1920 something or so on and so forth, they've been in their grave for 100 years now. Most of them have not, lived to be 100. So the thing is that, you want to set yourself up to make it so that your grave, which will very possibly be longer than the time that you were alive in this world, is going to be comfortable and not an aspect of punishment or torture. I mentioned this past week this concept of people saying well, I'm going to go to hell anyway, or I'm or these type of statements that people make. And it's just or they'll, for some people, they'll, for whatever reason, feel that they can put up with the torments of hell and so on and so forth. And I just mentioned a basic example. I said, if I were to do this to you, and I'm doing this to a 5-year-old, it doesn't hurt or anything like this, but after about 20 minutes, this is going to get very annoying. Mm-hmm. After an hour, 2 minutes for me. After an hour, this is going to be like torture. After 2 hours, you're going to want to be able to do something to, But the thing is that, just imagine having to go through that for 50 years. And it's not even an aspect of pain or anything like that. This is just an aspect of annoyance. Now the thing is that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He punishes. And He punishes in different ways. Not only that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way that He punishes is that this is one of the most scary parts of the aspect of the akhirah, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, La yamutu fiha wa la yahya, that they do not die in it, nor do they live. Meaning what? Meaning that a person in the hell fire in particular, once they come to the point that the torture is such that they feel you're just going to die, there's nothing else, I'm just going to die, what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regenerates you. Mm-hmm. So you have to go through it all over again. Then again, when you get to that point where you feel that you're going to die, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regenerates you again. And so it's just this aspect, you're in between. La yamutu fiha wa la yahya. They're not actually dead, but they're not actually living either. They're somewhere between. And that's, and people are saying well, if I have to go, then, because, I've had, especially when I was younger, I had friends of mine say, it's well, if I'm going to die happy. And, these type of things, essentially just, I want to do what I want to do. But Munkar and Nakir, these are going to be the first people, or the first angels that we're going to encounter, they'll be the third, after the angel of death. They'll be the second and third that we more or less encounter in that transition in terms of the angels that we're talking about today. And then the last two that we're going to mention, the first one is Malik. Malik is the one that you hope that you only see from afar. Malik is the angel that guards the gates of hellfire. And as I mentioned before, the angels, they don't have an aspect of sympathy when they're obeying the commands of Allah. So Malik has no sympathy for anyone in the hellfire. Because the people in the hellfire, they're going to complain to Malik and they're going to ask for, for clemency and so on and so forth. And Malik is not going to have any sympathy for any of them. And so Malik is the one that you hope that you only see from afar. And I mean from afar in terms of like, I'm in the completely opposite place that he is, and I'm just, giving him my salams from a distance. Assalamu alaikum, Malik. Keep doing you. It's about as close as I want to come to you. And then the other, who that you hope that you do see, and that he welcomes you with open arms, is Ridwan. Ridwan is the angel that guards the gates of paradise.
Is there English?
Ridwan, I don't know, but in Ridwan, Ridwan. So Ridwan is the angel that guards the gates of paradise, and this is the angel that you hope you do see. Now the thing is that we do have the concept in Islam that a person that has even an atom's weight of iman.
I'll talk about my mom about the angels' names.
Inshallah. But one of the things that we do have a concept of in Islam is that anyone that has even an atom's weight of iman in their hearts eventually will be taken out of the hellfire. So for some people, they'll have to, deal with the wrong end of Malik for a period of time, and then eventually, Ridwan will allow them into the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow them into paradise. Ridwan will allow them to come in. However, it's something that, we want to try to do our best that we can go into paradise, and ideally go into paradise without reckoning. This is a dua that I say every day, that, may Allah enter me into paradise without any reckoning. Because the reckoning itself is a punishment. Like, for example, has anyone ever had to go before a judge before?
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel before you go before the judge or the prosecutor? Huh? A little apprehensive, don't feel all that great. Well, I work in a prison, so, I'm dealing with people who, some of them got life and other things like that. But, so, you can imagine the anxiety and such that they feel, like, if you're on a murder trial or something like that. And, just imagine that. Now, the thing is that, even the faqir here, the poor one here, I've had to go in front of a judge before, and it was only traffic violations. And even for me, that was like,
that big ticket.
Yeah, it's like, even for me, it's like that. It's like, it's not, not the best feeling in the world. And then it seems like, your time to go up seems like it's, lasting forever. Well, the aspect of it is, think about the aspect of how many people have been in existence from the time of Adam. And let's say hypothetically that everyone had to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a minute. How long would that take before your time came around? But this is why, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet informed us about this aspect of the akhirah, that, some people there have, sweat up to their necks. Some people basically drowning in their own sweat. The day when the mother and the father and the son and the daughter, no one's going to want to have anything to do with anyone. Why? Because of the seriousness of that day. And so this is, why, I make the dua that, and this is something the Prophet, he encouraged us to do, because sometimes, like, as far as we're concerned, it's like, if I could just get into paradise in any way, that's all good for me. Like, as long as I can avoid hell, that's what I'm, most concerned about. However, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's Ar-Rahman, He's the most merciful. He's also Al-Kareem, He's the most generous. So don't restrict Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's generosity or His mercy. That's why the Prophet said that if you're going to ask Allah, ask Him for high matters. So if you're going to ask Allah for something, ask Him for Firdaus. Ask Him for the highest levels of paradise without any reckoning. That's what I hope for. Because I don't want to have to deal with what I've written in my book. But Ridwan is the angel who will be the one who will allow for those of paradise to actually enter the paradise. And so this is like, a very general, discussion about the angels. We could, say, much more, but for the sake of time, we're not going to hold anyone else, any longer, inshallah ta'ala. So next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll come back. The way that I think I'm going to do it, so that we have a kind of a plan, is that we'll go for another 2 weeks for multiple reasons. One is because in another 2 weeks, that week after that, I won't be able to do a class anyway. So we'll go for another 2 weeks. We'll have a break. And then what I think I'm going to do is that, because Ramadan will be shortly coming up after that, is that I intend to try to do a Ramadan type of prep sessions and things like that. So look out for that. So basically, we'll do another 2 weeks. That'll wrap up this kind of series, Certainty Amongst Confusion.
So the 8th and the 15th?
Yes.
Okay. The 22nd, you're unavailable.
Yep.
You won't be here.
Yep. And then
The 29th.
the 29th, so probably the 22nd and 29th, we won't be here.
Okay.
And then essentially what will happen is that we'll start back up and sometime in April. I might do 2 weeks in April, maybe those first 2 weeks or those middle 2 weeks right before Ramadan starts, as a Ramadan type of preparation course or situation, inshallah. More than likely what I'll probably do is that I'll look at it from one aspect, from the practical side of Ramadan, and the other aspect, the more spiritual aspect of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. So inshallah we'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.